Good morning, everyone. I am Patsy Keating, and I am involved with the Institute of Organization Development. And today we are welcoming you to another session of the Ask the OD Doctor. And today the doctor is in, and we have Miss Patty Damon, our president, who is going to help us to explore some hot topics that impact our OD community and around the world. We'll be interviewing today Gene Wheeler. Gene Wheeler is an educator, consultant, and public speaker. He has been involved in human resource consulting for over 30 years, helping individuals, teams, and organizations grow and strengthen in human capital. Gene has worked in a variety of industries of healthcare, pharmaceutical, banking, and local government. He was also the director of the Air Force Leadership School. And additionally, he taught graduate school at the New York Institute of Technology in the area of human resources and undergraduate courses in psychology and sociology. Gene is one of our leaders who heads up our executive coaching session, and he's written lots of great articles. And so we really hope that you enjoy Ask the OD Doctor today with both Gene Wheeler and being interviewed by our president, Miss Patty Damon. Take it away, Miss Patty.
I will. Well, thank you, Patsy. And Gene, welcome, and so glad you're here today. We could go on and on with your bio. It's just so extensive and impressive. But let's get into it. Let's talk about executive coaching. And the way I want to start off is I want to ask you the fact that you've written many articles on executive coaching. And when you, again, thinking about all those articles and all the research that you've done, what do you see the trends are when it comes to executive coaching?
You know, I want to start off by saying thank you, Patsy, for the introduction. Thank you, Patty, and Dr. Nancy Zentis, the CEO of the company, for inviting me today. And back to your question, you know, when we look at what's going on in the world today, you know, there's a lot of major benefits when it comes to companies who have created a culture around executive coaching. But what we're seeing is that there's not as much focus in the area of executive coaching as there was. But also there was a survey that was done with 13,605 leaders around the world last year. And one of the things as they looked at 50 countries is they said that 85% of HR professionals are saying there needs to be executive coaching. But they also said with the changes that are going on in the world today, in the work environment, there's going to be a dire need to have people who are skilled in executive coaching. And in the research that's been done, it says that there's also some confusion going on right now with people thinking, well, I have a background in counseling, I have a background in consulting or mentoring, and therefore I could be a good coach. And even though there's real qualities and things that come out of that, you know, I had to defend a thesis for a master's in education on one side and counseling on the other. And one of the things when I became an executive coach 23 years ago, I started to see there was a real difference. So just briefly, you know, when we think about you know, the difference between coaching and counseling and therapy, coaching is forward focused. Therapy is about damage control, and counseling is about distress. Mentoring, you know, even though all these skills are very important for an organization, when you look at the skills that are needed to be an executive coach, there's a real difference. You know, if the definition of coaching, and we'll go back to the questions here in a few minutes, is, you know, it's partnering. It's partnering in a thought-provoking process, a creative process that inspires the coachee. And so there's a growing demand for them, but there's a growing demand for people who are skilled in executive coaching. And there's a lot of things that a person has to give up in order to be an executive coach. And one of those is being the expert, the one who tells people what to do. And, I like what Dr. Marcy Reynolds, who's the past president of International Coaching Federation, says. She says, you have to be able to give up being the fixer to be the coach.
Jean, I'm so glad that you mentioned the fact that people are confused because there's all these programs, there's life coaches, and
Oh,
you
yeah.
go to a session for a day and you're a coach. So tell me a little bit about the distinction and why the Institute of OD's Executive Coaching Certification Program, why does it offer a superior model for developing those coaching skills for those people who attend?
Yeah, that's a great question, Patsy, or Patty, I'm sorry, is because that, there are a lot of great models out there. There's a lot of good coaching programs. But one thing about our model has 23 years of research backing it and a lot of experience where we've learned from our mistakes when it comes to doing things. So let me share with you a little bit about our model. Our model actually has 6 steps, but it has multiple models built into it. Whereas it's not enough, so many coaches, and I watch a lot of people as they coach. And when I first got into it, it was like those people in certain backgrounds, they like to say that, what do you want to work on? And let's move forward with some solutions. And they want to provide solutions based on their background. But if we look at our model is built around the stages of coaching. We have 6 stages, but within inside those 6 stages, there's multiple areas that other models that are tied to it. And what I want to share with you, we have inside our model, we have what's looking at the small talk side of working with a coachee. But one of the biggest mistakes that coaches make, and it's one of the significant questions that we use in the opening stage, is we say, what is your background for working with professional coaches? And a lot of coaches don't ask that. We have it as a significant question because the fact that and it's built into our model where that our participants practice this. They say, what's your experience with coaching? But I've had people ask me, so why do I need to ask that? I say, why wait to the 3rd or 4th session to find out that you've got someone that's had a bad experience with coaching? Right behind that, after you summarize that nicely to the person using good communication skills, you say, so what would have made that experience better? So back to your question about the model, we have questions and models within inside our 6-stage model. But another key component here is that we teach the participants in our certification how to work with sponsors, the types of questions that you ask. And we have a model built into this on what type of questions would you ask a sponsor? And what type to find out what the sponsor has done before they, so to speak, kind of drop the person on your desk. But a key component about our model compared to others, it starts looking at succession planning and how to use coaching skills for succession planning, but also how to take a person from where they are to where they need to be or want to be and put it right inside this model. So this model starts off with uncovering the goals, but prior to that, it's what does the coach need to do to prepare him or herself? We call it emptying the cup because there's so much mind clutter that can come about with inside the coach before they start to work with person, even down to the experience they've had with them. So our model is built with other models inside of it. A model of how to work with the coachee, how to work with the sponsors, how to work with succession planning, and how to take all the different skills. And I'm kind of moving fast forward here because we spend one whole session in the 8-month certification. We spend 3 hours talking about the whole side of coaching and going over 360 assessments, performance appraisals, and also the key component in succession planning.
That's great, Jean. Thank you for that. And I particularly appreciate the fact that you talk about the sponsor role and how important that is
Right.
to set a program up. So thank you for that. Now, many people have heard of the International Coaching Federation, the
Yes.
ICF core competencies. Can
Right.
you tell me a little bit how we've taken those core competencies and we've integrated those into the Institute of OD executive coaching certification?
That's a great question, because if you look at it, the ICF, International Coaching Federation, actually started in 1995. And if you look at what we've done is we've woven into our program, because we are actually a continuing coaching education component for ICF. In other words, anyone who goes through our program actually gets 40 hours of of hours towards an ICF certification. Now, this doesn't mean that our certification is not valuable for a person if they wanted to go out and be an executive coach in their organization, an executive coach in their community, because we prepare them. We're just saying if the person wanted to go the next step forward with the ICF side of things, the core competencies are actually, they're broken up into some different areas. And so in our course, what we do is we incorporate the core competencies. We look at first foundation, and we talk about this throughout our whole course, where you build the foundation as a coach. Now, what I like to say when it comes to the ICF core competencies, and even our homework assignments are tied to that, is that it's like a job description for the coach. Whereas, where it's requiring that trust, it's demonstrating ethical practices, it's embodying a coaching mindset that the coach maintains through the whole time that they're working with a person, depending on what the goal is for the coaching. But it's also co-creating that relationship. And these are some of the core competencies that ICF has when it comes to moving forward. It's establishing that agreement, the safety and the trust and the confidentiality. But a key component, and we really elaborate on this throughout our whole course, is the communication skills that are necessary to be an effective coach. And that's listening actively. That's listening to learn, not to judge, not to examine through the coach's eyes, but through the coachee's eyes. And that's what listening is all about. So we talk about what are the skills that are so necessary. It's being able to summarize, being able to paraphrase, being able to mirror. And in each one of our activities that we do in our course, in session, outside of session, the 30 hours that they actually have to acquire in order to get this certification, is that we want them to be able to practice this, to be able to summarize, to know how to see through the eyes of the coachee. Going back to our model, one part of our model is called unpacking the goal. You unpack the goal by seeing through the eyes of the coachee. You ask them what they've been doing in regards to this, how they feel about this. Too many coaching models are built around, what do you want to work on? Here's the solutions. Let's make it happen. Rather than looking at options and obstacles, what's the best option and obstacle before we convert discussion to decision? We even do, in our model, it's built in with a brainstorming session with the individual to find out what is the best solution. And let's test it in a safe environment. So one of the other core competencies is cultivating learning growth. Coaching should be all about, cultivating that growth for the coachee.
Love that. Thank you, Jean. Now, let me, one thing that you mentioned, and I just want to explore it just a little bit, is you mentioned ethical practices. So just to touch on that a little bit and why that's so important and why we pay attention to that
You
as
know,
a coach.
well, when it comes down to the ethical practice now, a coach has to realize that they are not an attorney. They don't have the attorney's rights with what goes on in here. I can't say anything about it. And one thing we elaborate on quite a bit when it comes to the confidentiality side of things is you're not an attorney. And if anything comes up during the session that is against the bylaws and things of the organization or the standard of confidentiality, you're liable if you don't share that. And so we talk about that, but we say, you're not an attorney. And so you have to, there's certain things that you want to keep kind of confidential, but there's things that if you see it's outside of boundaries, then by all means, it has to be talked about.
Okay, that's a great example. Thank you. When you think about how you can support people that attend the class, how do you support learning
One
for
of the
these
things
people?
that I like, even in session one, because that so many people have a background in counseling and mentoring and consulting, I look at what's the difference between the definitions, but then I play a game with them. And so back to your question, what do I do to really bring about the learning? I like gamification. I like where that I'll put them in a situation. I'll say, so what would you do? Or I'll look at what's going on in their world from coaching side, and I say, so let's explore that. Let's take the people around the room here and look at that. So I like gamification. I like case studies. And one of the key things that has been so successful for the last 5 years that I've been teaching this is a playbook, where that each person builds a playbook, and then I give them little examples of what I think would be a good playbook. Whereas, what would be mind joggers that you could use? Maybe have something on your desk that as you're working with someone, that would be a mind jogger for you that, okay, significant questions. I want to find out what their background is of working with coaches. And then I want to find out what would made that better. And so they build that into their playbook per session. And as we look at session two, we start to take those significant questions. And so I have an activity where I say, these are significant questions we could ask. Why would we ask these? And so I start to see their perception around those. And so I like games, I like gamification, I like case studies. And of course, all of this is incorporated in our homework assignments. But prior to a class, I'll look at the participants that are in the class and I'll say, what type of activity would make it so much easier for them to learn?
Love that. Tell me a little bit about when you're even working with your audience, like who are the people that need this certification, right? Why would you recommend it and why do people need it?
When you look at what's going on in the world today, and I'm just going to use the word sense making. All right. There's a lot of tremendous authors and experts in the field right now that, and I could list all the different books, but I won't, that are saying that leaders today are looking around and say, well, this doesn't make sense to me. And so one of the key things that we cover, all coaching helps the coachee and it helps the sponsors. But there's only one type of coaching that challenges the mindset of the leader, and that's vertical coaching. And that's one of the things that we pride ourselves in what we present. Because leaders are looking around right now, and leaders that have had training programs of 10 years ago are seeing that it's not adequate for this day and time. We use the word VUCA, volatile, uncertain, changing, ambiguous environment. And if you look around, there's a lot of leaders that are saying, well, this doesn't make sense to me. And the reason it doesn't make sense to them is because they have not matured vertically. Vertical coaching helps the leader to mature vertically, where that they start seeing through a different lens. But one of the things, Patty, that they have to do is they have to challenge their mental model of the way that they do things. Now, I'll go back to what I had said earlier when it came down to one of the significant questions that we always ask our coachees is we'll ask the question, tell me about your claim to fame. What is it you really are so pleased with what you've done? And then we have them walk us through that. You know what we're learning right there? We're learning what their mental model is. We're learning, is their model of doing things compatible with today's work environment? If you look around the work environment today, diversity, age diversity, inclusion, technology, AI, And all of these are things that, when it comes to the vertical side of vertical development, so we spend 1 3-hour session talking about, look around your environment and look at what are the leadership styles that you're seeing. And not only what are the leadership styles, are these leadership styles compatible with what is necessary for this day environment? So we actually have an assessment tool that we work with in that session. And one of the things that we talk about is we look at vertical development. We determine, where is this person right now with vertical? What stage are they at? So we start to assess that, but then we start to assess their leadership style. And all the research that goes back to 1980, all the way up to 2023, with some of the research, shows 3 different leadership styles that you see in the organization. But it also shows that some of the most powerful organizations in the world are learning organizations. So in this session, we present the fact that when you work with coachees and you work with sponsors, that you want them to look at the lens, is the way that the leader's leading, are they leading that's compatible with the new world of work? Because what we're seeing is even some of the most powerful assessments that are out there for vertical development. I've visited some of the CEOs and they come back and they say to me, they say, as we go in and work in an organization, one of the things that we're seeing that the top wants their leaders to do this at the bottom or at the middle, but they're not ready to adapt to it yet. And they're using the term morphing, because the leader at the middle, if they're expected to lead a particular way, or then if they're not doing it at the top, they're going to morph right back to the way that leadership is done at the top. So we look at the vertical development side of things. And if you compare this, and I wrote an article and did a lot of research with other executive coaching programs. And I looked at, not all coaching programs are created equally. And one of the things that I found is that they primarily look at the horizontal knowledge and skills coaching, but they don't look at the mindset, challenging the mindset, and also looking, is it compatible with the world of work?
Thank you for that, Gene. Now, one of the things that I was thinking about, and we have the name executive coaching. For people that coach, is it these skills, will it only be for executives to
No.
coach executives? How
You
does
know,
that work?
that's a very good question, because when I look at the people that have attended this course, and people that I've talked over the phone after we do the webinar around this course, they say, well, who should attend? I said, emerging leaders would be great at this, because here's the thing. When you start to see a coaching environment in an organization where somebody goes into a meeting and all of a sudden they're using the same skills that the coach is working with a coachee. And that's what you're wanting. And that's why a coaching program like ours is good for all levels. And yes, executive coaches are brought in to primarily work with executives, but it's good for all levels. And that's why in one of our sessions, we talk about, what are the skills that are necessary to go over a performance appraisal? How can you incorporate that? What are the skills that are necessary to go over a 360 assessment? And we go over that and we say, let's take the same skills that you have right now. Let's grow the organization by looking at the emerging leader having these skills, with the high potential having these skills. And so the research that of those companies that I say that have been looked at all over the world, that say that there's going to be a dire need for coaches in the next 3 years, and 85% of those were HR professionals from every corner of the globe, they're saying that there's going to be a need for people that are skilled in coaching, because things are not going to make sense to the leaders.
85%, Gene, you use that term of HR people said that they need coaching. Their organization needs coaching. Is that how
But the
I
thing,
get
yes,
that right?
but and the thing is when you look at the number of people who sign up for our course,
Yeah.
It gets less. And when we dialogue with people, well, I've got a counseling background. Well, I'm a PhD. I have PhDs in my class that'll, right after the first session, they'll say, well, this is not psychiatry. This is not a psychologist. I says, no. I said, the skills that you'll learn here will help you for every area. That's why that when it comes to practicing coaching, we say, you know something, you could take something as simple and put in the center of our model and watch the pieces come together. Somebody could say, you know, I want to lose weight. Okay. And then instead of saying, these are the suggestions I think you should have, but when I worked in healthcare, I had a CEO come to me and say, I want to expand the capabilities outside of these walls. And I could take this same model and apply it and find out what they've done in regards to this already, even if I had ideas and suggestions that I thought were good. So you can take this model and apply it to any goal that a person has.
So tell me, and I think you answered it, but how can so when you take the program, you take any, this program and they're working with you, how do they develop these skills? Like how do you set up the session so they can develop them?
You know, in each one of our classes, either in the beginning or in the end, we do some exercises. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll say, so what are you working on? What's some challenges and stuff that you're having? And then I'll have them practice with me. But then I'll have the participants also provide feedback. But they'll also say, well, what did you see that Gene did that was learning from you? And so what we'll do, but also I do one-on-ones with people where that they'll call me up, we'll set things up. I give everyone my phone number. And if somebody's in another country, I have people from South Africa that have been in this class and that have went through the full certification. But we could go into a platform. We have a very good platform that we use. It's called Big Blue. It's part of our learning management system once a person signs up for it. I can go into it, Patty, just like you and I are right now. And I can say, let's talk about what's going on with you. And let's look at what you've done. Let's look at what you feel like that you want to do different. What are some obstacles you're facing? And in that session, we'll brainstorm options and obstacles to help that. So back to your question, we do a lot of practice, but we do one-on-one when it comes to my working with them.
And as a result of those one-on-ones and as a result of those activities, what do you hear from participants who have gone through the program, are actually using the skills that they developed during that 8-month period?
You
What do
know,
you hear?
a lot of them have, we do a feedback survey. And it's part of our learning management system, and it's part of the individual development plan that they fill out. And they'll say that it's had created awareness, a difference in their way of coaching, the support, that they have people in the organization that are really reaching out to them and see them as really skilled when it comes to them. And that the 6-step model and the mind joggers and things are things that they have continually used. I have people that took this certification 4 years ago that still reach out to me and say that, going through and putting together the playbook and all the different pieces of it, it has really helped me. But for most, they've said that the comprehensive model that was used and the tools and things that were tied to that. Some of the tools that we use, we like the Johari window, which shows blind spots. We also like looking at some of the other things, the ladder of inference, because a lot of people will get on one ladder of inference and they'll make a decision. So we show the coach how to use that, but also to work with the coachee and say, this is what you're doing. You're jumping up the ladder and making a decision based on your culture, based on your past experience. But you need to look at all of these. So these are things we start to see that where one person said, developing an understanding of the vertical development principles and how that a lot of leaders need to mature. Some literature that was put out just last week said that coaches, people who are professional coaches, need to start looking at their own self when it comes to their own vertical maturity. And how mature are they when it comes to meeting the needs of people that they'll come in and they'll say, well, this doesn't make sense to me. And it may not make sense to the coach because he or she has not looked at elevating their thinking. Ryan Gottfredson wrote a beautiful book last year, and it was called The Elevated Thinker. And one of the things, his book was dated 2023, and he did research. And he said that, the leaders of today cannot depend upon training programs 15 years ago. But the coach needs to look at him or herself and say, what have I done to elevate my thinking? So some of the feedback that we're getting from people, it's improved their active listening, their coaching tools and things they've used, their style, their personality, but also their credibility when it comes down to working with people in the organization, especially working with senior leadership. And people who've gone out and they are now executive coaches and work for companies, they say, I can walk in with their credibility. I've got that badge on all my correspondence that say that I went through the 8-month certification. I have a letter from Dr. Nancy Zentis that says all the things that I went through. I also have a letter that says what this could be if it applied 40 hours toward the International Coaching Federation certification.
Jean, we have a little bit of time left. Could you share the 6-step model with our audience?
Yeah, the 6-step model is based on, I said earlier that when it comes down to this model, it is built around 6 steps, but within inside each one of the steps, there is also other models. So kind of back to what you were saying, the very first piece of the model, and just think about a pie diagram. And when it comes down to our webinar on this, we actually show the pie diagram, but it shows that the pieces are separated. And so prior to going into any coaching situation, one of the things the coach does is they empty their cup. They examine any brain clutter and things that they may have. So the model, we start off with prior to the coaching session. And this is if I'm working with a coachee, the model varies just a little bit working with a sponsor. And we look at significant questions. We look at the icebreaker, getting to know the person, but then asking the significant questions. And that's when we start to look at, that's setting the stage with them. And when we feel like, Patty, I want you to think that executive coaching is all about information gathering. And so the coach asks themselves, they say, what kind of information do I need to work with this person? I need to have, and I like to use the word profile. I need to have a profile on them, and I'm going to take the information that I gather and use it now, or I'm going to use it in the future. So the model, it starts with setting the stage with significant questions, what their experience is with coaches, what they're most proud of. But also we look at something, who is your support person inside the organization? We use the word support person there, not accountability partner. But when it comes down to them working on something, say a homework assignment, a development area, how could you hold yourself accountable? You mentioned this was an accountability partner for you. How could they hold you accountable? So that's the opening. Step 2 is uncovering the goal, where you actually find out what the person has done so far, how they feel about it, what the impact is. But then we get into step 3. It's the aspects of the goal. We unpack it. We lay things out. We find out what the person has done in regards to this goal in the past. But if we're working with sponsors, we want to find out what they've done. We move from step 3 to step 4, which is options and obstacles. In that area, in a very safe environment, we explore the options and the obstacles to this. And it could be a political landscape inside the organization, outside. But in a safe environment, we look at that. Step 5, we look at converting discussion to decision, where we've looked at what's the best solution after the options and obstacles. And you'll see that by using this as a model, it may take a little bit longer to work with someone, but you can see the impact, and all of a sudden, then you start to see the person go out and use this. Another key component here is this is all built around evaluation and communication. with the individual, the coachee, and with the sponsors, because we want to keep the coachee informed on how it's working, but we want to find out if we're working well with them. With the sponsors, it's the same thing. And so when you look at closure and support, we look at what is the coachee going to need? Who's going to support them after that? And that's how the model's built.
Gene, that was just so enlightening. Everything you talked about. Thank you so much. And going into depth, I think we all have learned more about executive coaching, and most importantly, the approach we use at the Institute of OD to help people be the best that they could be when it comes to coaching. Yeah. And Gene, you're certainly the man to do it. So thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to Patsy to end.
How enlightened. You know, I'm a certified coach from another organization, and Gene, this brought such great light to me that, you know, I need to take this program and gain some of these skills and really enhance my own personal coaching abilities. So if you are interested in talking a little bit further with us about our executive coaching program, perhaps you want to we have a little self-assessment. So we would be happy to send that to you. So thank you again, Gene. And on behalf of the IOD team, you know, this concludes Ask the OD Doctor. And stay tuned for our next episode of The Doctor Is In.
And thank
Have
you
a great
for inviting
day,
me.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.